Civilians were condemned to live in tents. Who wants to live on the top of the mountain, in dust and dirt? Among snakes and scorpions, Russia now wants to close the humanitarian aid doors, as if the air strikes were not enough.
Charles Lawley, who is the head of advocacy and public affairs at the Syria Relief Organisation. Good to see you again, Charles. I'm just thinking that this is another case of food as a weapon of war. Is that basically what's happening?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And yeah, you're completely right. As your excellent foreign correspondent, Sarah, just said, you know, this is the weaponization of aid. So the plan is from geopolitical actors in this conflict is to completely close down all of the cross-border aid and which would mean that people in northwest Syria and northeast Syria are reliant on what's called cross-line aid, so coming from regime-held areas. As we've seen throughout this conflict, you know, we've seen people starved, we've seen siege tactics, we've seen people bombed. Human life has been very, very cheap. Nobody has any confidence that this decision, if it were that all aid was to come via cross lines, that it wouldn't be used to starve people into achieving military achievements.
I think it's probably 2 years or so now, if my time references are correct, that Idlib became the last remaining territory in Syria not under government control. And at that stage, Turkey entered into an agreement with Russia to make sure that there wasn't an all-out advance that would presumably have cost many, many lives as the regime in Damascus tried to regain control of the entire country. Is this, do you think, part of a strategy to do that? Because we have seen in the past few weeks, we've seen some airstrikes in Idlib, we've seen a little bit of renewed military action.
I think it's a very real fear. I mean, we're not here to sort of judge the motives of people, of the actors in this conflict, but it is a real concern that this is, you know, aid being militarized. But I struggle to believe that anyone can, in a situation like we have in Syria now, where 90% of the population living below the poverty line, 80% are either in severe or critical need of humanitarian assistance, that any actor could go to the UN Security Council in good faith and argue that there should be less aid getting into Syria and not more aid. I just can't understand how anyone with any ounce of humanity could be arguing that, you know, these people need less help, not more help.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said earlier, there used to be 4 crossings, then there were 2, and now we're left with this last one. You mentioned the situation right across Syria. Can you tell us more about that? I mean, because many of us don't really understand how people who are living in government-controlled areas are experiencing the difficulties that come with a war situation now in its 11th year.
Absolutely. You know, as you said, over a decade of conflict has meant that humanitarian needs are very complex. It's not just food, it's not just water. You know, we're seeing lots and lots of people with very, very complex needs. If you're living in a war zone, your individual circumstances is going to be very, very different to your neighbours. But what is common is poverty. Like I said, 90% of the population are living in poverty. Over 13 million Syrians are now dependent on some form of humanitarian aid. The majority of that's food, water, shelter. You know, the basic human rights are so scarce. And as we saw when the Al-yaroubiya crossing closed just over a year ago, the needs have since increased by 38%. This is now the Al-hawa crossing in northwest Syria. It now serves, you know, millions of people. The impact could be devastating. As Sarah said in the report, you know, this is life-saving aid. Unfortunately, the consequence of removing life-saving aid is death. It will kill people.
Charles, thanks very much. Always appreciate your contributions. Charles Lawley is from the Syria Relief Organisation.